Hello everyone, my name is Kalogiannis Georgios. I'm a corporate mechanical engineer and I have 12 years of experience in corporate hiring processes and psychometric tests. As we discussed in our previous video, today we will discuss some real practical examples regarding the SHL Inductive Reasoning module. Here, in this particular sequence, we need only two patterns. Start with the first and the most obvious one that we can easily identify simply by looking at the sequence, and this is the location of the gray circle in the middle of each frame. Since the previous 4 frames in the sequence contains the gray circle in this particular location, then it is safe to assume that the last frame we are looking for must contain the gray circle in the exact same location in the middle of the frame. Therefore, we can immediately exclude answer option B, as it is the only answer option black circle in the middle, not a gray. Now, as for the second pattern is identified by looking at the number of black circles contained inside its circular frame. Now, let's start with the first frame. It includes a pair of black circles, which is an even number of circles, followed by the second frame, which contains only a single black circle, which is an odd number. Then if we move on to the third frame, we see again that we have 4 black circles, which is again an even number, followed by 1 circle on the fourth frame, which is an odd number. Therefore, pattern that exists based on the number of black circles in the sequence is that an even number black circles is always followed by an odd number, and then again we must have an even number appearing inside the frame. Since the fourth frame contains an odd number of circles, then the last frame must contain again an even number of black circles. Now, if we have a look at answer options that we screened from previous time, the only answer option aligns with this observation and contains an even number of black circles is answer option E. Thus, this is the correct answer option, and this is the one that we need to select for this particular task. Now, moving on to the next task, this one is also a very typical example of a task that usually appears in the SHL non-interactive version. In this particular one, as we can see, we have a single sophisticated frame that we need to analyze and identify the path. Here, the frame is a square, and this square frame is divided into 4 identical sub-square frames, in which each sub-square frame is further divided into 2 sub-triangular sectors. The upper sector includes one particular shape with 2 distinct formats, and the other triangular sector includes a shield which also is divided into 2 distinct format areas. Now, the first pattern that we need to identify for finding the correct shape that it will be placed on bottom left corner of the frame is which shape is going to be. If we pay close attention to the left hand side half of the square frame, we see the top right corner, and on the bottom right corner we have a square shape. Now, if we see the other half, we can observe easily that on the top left corner we have a circle. Therefore, we can deduce the identical shape must also appear on the bottom left corner. Therefore, we can automatically reject answer option A, C, and D just because they propose square and not a circle, leaving with the only viable answer options, answer option B and answer option E. Now, the second pattern that we need to find is the pattern that determines the format in the 2 distinct areas inside the shape. By beginning our analysis with the top left circle inside the sophisticated square frame, we see that the second half of the circle is identical to the first half format of the following shield if we take the clockwise direction. And in the same way, the second area's format is identical to the second area format of the previous shield if we look in the counterclockwise direction. Now, if we apply the same logic to the other 2 shapes that are residing in the other 2 edges, in the other 2 corners of the frame, we see that the same rules applies. This particular format is identical to the format of the previous shield, and this sector's format is identical to the following shield's format in this area, and the same goes for this one. This format is identical to this one, and this one is identical to this one. So if we apply same pattern here, we can easily deduce the first half, the circle, must have a solid black color, and the other half must have a dotted hash format, which, as we can easily observe, is identical to the answer option E, and thus this is the correct alternative that we need to select for this task.
As you probably have already realized, the inductive reasoning tasks demand a certain level of experience for efficiently and effectively tackling them. For this reason, I would like to wholeheartedly recommend the book Mastering Inductive Reasoning Tests for Corporate Recruitment Purposes. This book is the ultimate preparation tool for the candidate, as it contains a patterns library which is a database with registration of every possible pattern that a candidate may encounter during his evaluation. Thus, the book contains 13 practice tests, which they incorporate every possible difficulty level that you as a candidate may face in your actual evaluation. Plus, inside the book, you will find plenty of applied knowledge regarding the test design, as well as tips, tricks, and advice on how you should approach the tasks. You will find link for buying your own copy in the description below, so you don't miss the chance to add the book in your arsenal for your preparation.
Now moving on the next task. In this task, as we can see, we have a sequence of circular frames. Now each circular frame contains inside a geometrical shape in the middle of the frame, along with two arrows, one black and one grey. Now as we can see, final frame, we have the location of the two arrows, thus does not add any value to rotational patterns. The thing that we must do is to determine which geometrical shape must be placed in the middle of this frame, along with its format inside, whether it's going to be solid black or white. By observing the sequence and the location of the black arrows, we can see that the last frame has the black arrow in the exact same location as the first frame. And since the first frame has a geometrical shape in a solid black format, then we can deduce the same geometrical shape that must be placed in this location must also have solid black color. Therefore, based on this observation, we can automatically reject answer option A, B, and C, which we give alternatives with a solid white shape, and we should keep as viable options answer option D and answer option E. Now let's observe the position of the grey arrow. As we can see from the transitions, the frames, whenever the grey arrow rotates in the clockwise direction, the number of edges of the geometrical shape increases in the following frame. And using the same pattern, whenever the grey arrow rotates by a certain degree in the counterclockwise direction, the number of edges in the geometrical shape decreases. Therefore, since from the third to the fourth frame, the grey arrow rotates in the clockwise direction by a certain degree, then we must expect the number of edges must increase in the fourth frame. And since in the third frame we had a rectangle, then we can safely assume that the following frame must be a pentagon. And now we can see from the two available options that we have that the correct one is the answer option D, and thus this is the one that we must select. Now moving on to the next task, we see here again we have a sophisticated square frame. The same way it happened a couple of tasks before, the square frame is divided further into 4 sub-square regions inside, and each sub-square region is further divided into 2 sub-triangular regions. Now the pattern in this particular case can be seen if we divide the square frame into 2 halves, and we can see there is a mirroring symmetry between the right hand side and the left hand side. Let's observe the upper half of the square frame, and we can see that the geometrical shape that appears on the left hand side is the same as the geometrical shape that appears on the right hand side, with the only difference that the right hand side the geometrical shape is inscribed inside the circle. Now by using the same logic, in the missing sub-square sector that we are looking for, it must contain a square inscribed inside the circle, and thus without making any further processing or any additional pattern in this task, we can immediately see that the correct answer option is answer option D, as it is the only possible correct alternative based on the pattern that we just found. Now let's move on to the next task. In this particular case, we have a matrix. The matrix, to summarize, is nothing more than a collection of sequences that forms rows and columns. As we mentioned in the previous video of 10 commandments of psychometric test, usually in order to find the pattern that are governing the matrices, we need to dissect and analyze the sequences in rows or columns. But in this particular case, we will dissect this matrix into sequences of rows, and then we'll try to identify the patterns based on the rows. By looking at the first row sequence, we can observe in the last frame that the bottom right shape is identical to the top left geometrical shape that is included in the first frame. If we move in the sequence of the second row, we see that the exact same pattern appears again, as the bottom right triangle is identical to the top left triangle in the first frame of the second row. Now, by using this pattern, and if we applied it, and by having a quick glance at the available answer choices that they are given to us, we can quickly see that the only alternative that fulfills this condition is answer choice B, and thus it is the correct one. We need to take it immediately. Now as we move forward, here we have another very typical task that it is frequently encountered in the SHL Inductive Reasoning Non-Interactive. Here, instead of a sequence of frame or a matrix, we have a collection of squares. Each big square has a distinct format, and the overlapping areas between the squares, they are adopting a different format than the format of each individual square. Now obviously, for finding the correct format that must pass in this overlapping area, we need to find a pattern that will give the correlation between the overlapping areas and the correct format. Beginning with this top overlapping area, it is easy to observe that it has exactly the same format as the square area in front of this overlapping area. Now if we move on this overlapping area, we can easily see that the pattern is identical to the pattern of the big square just in front of this overlapping area. Therefore, if we apply the same pattern for this particular overlapping area, then it is easy to deduce that the format must be identical to the format of this big square area, this cross net that it is formed. Therefore, the correct alternative is answer option D, and this is the one that we select for resolving this task. Moving on to the next task, here we have a sequence of square frames. For identifying the second square frame in the sequence, the first pattern, which is also the most obvious one, is to determine the background format of the frame. Now if we have a look at the following frames pairs, the third and the fourth, and the fifth and the sixth, we see that each pair has identical background format, meaning that the third and the fourth has a parallel line hatching format, and the fifth and the sixth has a solid black color as background color. Now if we apply this pattern for the second frame, we can immediately see that it must be white. Therefore, if we have a look at the available answer choices, we can immediately reject answer option C and answer option D, leaving answer option A, B and E as the only viable one. Now the second pattern that we need to determine is the pattern that determines the color inside the circle located in the middle of the frame. If we have a look at the last three frames in the sequence, we see that the internal color inside the circle follows a particular cascade. The cascade is black dotted hatch pattern and white. Now if we come back in the first three frames, we see that we have the solid black circle, the white circle, leaving the dotted hatch pattern as the missing middle frame. Therefore, based on this observation, we can quickly see that the answer option A is the correct answer for this task.
So finally we reached the conclusion of the second part of the SHL Inductive Reasoning Test tutorial. I would like to thank you all for being here with me in this educational video, and I promise to come back with more relevant content in the future. Thank you all again for watching. Like, share and subscribe if you found any value to the video, and see you again in the next one.